think we should move on to guitars.
We can move on to guitars. The guitar sessions were awesome. It's probably the most fun I've had recording guitars, and we had Natalie on guitar, and we did 2 days
2 days.
2 days of guitar tracking, in which we set up a wall of amplifiers and kind of decided what the main rhythm tone was going to be, what the main cleaner tones were going to be, the more main atmospheric ones, and the tone that seemed to win a lot, I remember, was there was a AC15 or an AC30 that belongs to Finn.
Yep.
Right? With a U87 in front of it, with the space echo in the effects loop nearly always.
Well, that was we didn't use it for this in particular one.
Not even working as a reverb unit in
I'm
the
not
effects
sure.
loop.
I'm not sure. Let me just have to listen and remind myself. No, so this was just the AC30 with the 87, the room mics.
And I remember that winning a lot. I remember we had a Marshall and some Hughes and Kettners and all sorts of things. I remember it winning a lot, and I remember also we used the vibrato on it a lot as well. Maybe not on this track, but on another one.
We did on Kuda Fudra.
And we just spent a lot of time finding these kind of really complementary parts to the rest of the EP, because there was... What Nat's good at is finding complementary melodies and complementary chord voicings and things, whilst Cherry is strumming on the acoustic, and whilst there's if it's busy, she's really good at selecting something that kind of doesn't get in the way too much. And we wanted to represent that with as much sort of give it a really nice place in the mix, I think. And we just spent a lot of time with her in the control room and a guitar playing through parts whilst we kind of experimented.
And this is an example of a part where it wasn't initially going to be recorded with any room mics, but I think I insisted, and then we ended up doing it. And it's because the way that Natalie was playing was lots of little stabs and lots of held out chords. I think the most obvious way to show that is in the chorus, where if I just solo the acoustic, solo these main guitars for you, you can hear how much the rooms add some decay to it. So you can hear the AC30's reverb there, the built-in, I think it's a spring in there.
It sounds like a spring.
Throwing it. But quite how much of a difference there is. It also sounds like
it's hitting the spring kind of hot.
Very hot. I think this was
nice.
This was pushed. This was nice and pushed.
Yeah.
And it just adds some ear candy on the sides that's really important for this song, and just some more detail. So in the chorus you do get some nice stuff going on. So it's not crazy loud in the mix, but it is pretty integral to it. And I think now we get to move on to the most fun part of the song for me.
Yeah. The space echo guitars. I mean, if a piece of gear that I would say to people that if you want an effects machine that is going to be difficult to replicate some of the things it does. It's not difficult to replicate what it's meant to do. It's difficult to replicate what happens when it goes wrong.
And that's, in fact, really obvious here, where it jumps a bunch of times.
And then in an intro to the beginning of the EP, if you skip past the backwards part of it, that noise that makes it sound post-apocalyptic is this thing malfunctioning. In
fact, it happens at the end of this song, where it just goes on sort of forever. We tune up the repro time, I think it is. Or tune down the repro time and it speeds up.
Yeah. So it's just, and it's also, it's a tangible thing. You can touch it and you can mess with it, and it's...
I think this session even had the lid off.
The sound. Yeah, there's a video with the lid off.
Yeah. So you can sort of see how it was working and how it was fighting.
It certainly became the part of the sound of this record, and so there's a whole thing with this.
I'll just play you it just on its own, because you can hear it in the mix, but it's kind of curious to see how much work it's doing on its own.
It's going to keep pitch dropping, and it's just great.
It does often. And also, don't forget, the room mics here are doing a ton of work and throwing it out. So you're going to hear reverb from the space echo, from the amp, and from the room.
Yeah,
all
it's in the effects loop, so we're committed to that sound.
Here we go. So just there, right? It literally it freaks out, but it sounds great. And in the song, it just gives it even more character and even more vibe, whatever word you want to use, whatever adjective you're feeling, it does, and it works.
It's a really cool thing. Quite often, I'll use it tracking vocalists, and might not even record it because sometimes it's quite a severe thing to track with a vocalist, but sometimes it gives them the vibe that they want. It's a really interesting machine. I just think they're great. One day I'll get one for myself.
Absolutely, you can still find them. And just for some context, I want to show how much in the mix, how much I relied on these room mics to really put it in that space. So I've got the 87 soloed and the room mic soloed, and I'll just flick on and off the room mics and you hear quite how much work it's doing in the mix. It really, really does build that atmosphere.
Massive, isn't it?
It's huge how much of a difference it makes. It's weird how important or integral even a good room is to an album, an EP like this, where you need the room sound is just so crucial in getting that vibe across. And there's also a complementary guitar part to that later on, which is a solo, but it's playing at the same time as the Space Echo with almost the exact same tone, except it's more distorted. And so I automated the panning. So that, I'll show you this now, the solo. So it's got basically the same processing chain.
I should know.
You should know this, as you recorded this. It's got almost the same processing chain, but it's a bit distorted on the way into the amp, and I'll just play that for you now in solo. It's just a really cool part that I think was done on the spot by Nat, right?
Yeah,
it was on the spot in the studio, let's put a little solo thing in here.
In rehearsals, we've tried to remember.
I'm trying to remember what you played.
That was another really good example of it malfunctioning. Like there's a point where it dips, and there's also a point where it's going sharper than the previous note the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's speeding up constantly.
It's cool how because it's analog and because it's like half broken, it does all this really good stuff. We'll come back to this at the end because I want to play this little end bit of how it's being manipulated in real time to get a really cool effect going on. But I think first we need to touch on these Rage Against the Machine guitars. I think is what we called them in the moment, which is essentially, I think this was the Houston Kettner through a Marshall 212 that we had into 57. I think so. But these are just kind of like what in country you'd call windshield hyper guitars. They're just holding down some distortion, some more stuff to go wide. So when you get to this big last chorus, more stuff comes in. They all just kind of add up to this grander feel, so that for the last chorus you get this huge lift up and this distortion, and it all kind of goes a bit nuts. It's great.
With the heavier guitars, I say heavier, that's not heavy, but like with that kind of tone of guitars that we had on the EP, there was a sound that I was hearing, which, as Keenan says, is kind of Rage Against the Machine type tone. This part in particular has that tone. It's not necessarily that kind of part. There is one on the EP which really, really is
in rhythm.
Went for it. Yeah. But I'd
argue that tone is basically just the sound of 57.
It's exactly the same,
It's a 57 doing its
57, that is definitely a Hughes and Kettner.
Mm-hmm. And that sounds like a Strat on position 4 or a Telly on middle, something like that.
It is a Telly. All the electric guitars on the entire EP were...
they were Nat's Telly. Yes.
Nat's Telly, so...
Yes, I remember now. And so that's the whole arrangement of the song. I think now we can move on to just the vocals.
Yes.
And some stuff that's going on with the vocals. So thanks for watching. If you want to watch the very last video where we go through all the different vocals and parts of the mastering of the song, then keep watching because it's coming up next. Thanks.